Last Train to Dhanushkodi, an audiobook based on a real incident, written, narrated, and published by Sweet Audible. Prologue, The Ghost Station. A dark night, the distant clatter of a train, and a mysterious old man's warning. Your journey begins here, where history and ghostly tales intertwine. The train rattled gently as it left Madurai station and rolled into the night. My compartment was almost empty, just a few scattered passengers, a family with sleepy children, and one solitary old man who sat near the window, his face half hidden under a wrinkled shawl. The ceiling fan groaned, the bulbs flickered, and outside, the darkness of Tamil Nadu spread like a vast canvas of silence. I was on my way to Rameshwaram, that narrow spit of land jutting into the Indian Ocean, to see for myself the ghost town everyone whispered about, Dhanushkodi, a place erased from maps by the wrath of a cyclone in 1964. But little did I know that my journey was about to become something far more unsettling. The train wheels sang a metallic lullaby, and I dozed lightly until I heard a voice, low, rough, almost conspiratorial. "You're going to Rameshwaram?" It was the old man. His eyes, though sunk in deep sockets, were alive with a strange fire. I nodded. Yes, and then to Dhanushkodi. At the sound of that name, a flicker passed over his face, something between fear and reverence. He leaned closer. "Have you heard of the last train?" he asked. His words caught me off guard. "The last train?" I repeated. He smiled grimly. "Yes, the last train to Dhanushkodi. Train number 653, December 22, 1964. It left Rameshwaram station at night with more than 100 souls on board. But it never reached its destination. The sea swallowed it whole." I knew fragments of this history. Everyone who grows up in Tamil Nadu hears stories of the cyclone that wiped out an entire town in a single night. But the way he said it, in that whisper that trembled between fact and legend, sent a chill crawling up my spine. "They say," he continued, his voice softer now, "that sometimes on dark nights like this, if you stand near the old line to Dhanushkodi, you'll hear the whistle of a train that should no longer exist. Some even swear they've seen it, an engine of light, coaches filled with shadows, a phantom train still running its last journey, doomed to never arrive." The compartment fell silent except for the rhythmic clatter of wheels. His words lingered in the air like smoke. I wanted to ask more, but he had leaned back into his seat, eyes closing, as if the effort of speaking had drained him. The train swayed, the bulbs dimmed, and the whistle cut through the night. I looked out of the window. Fields rushed past, villages slept under a blanket of stars, and somewhere far away, the ocean waited. A strange unease grew in me. Why had I come on this journey? Was it just to see the ruins of a forgotten town, or was something else pulling me there? The old man stirred once again, just as the train slowed for a small station. He opened his eyes and looked straight at me. "If you really go to Dhanushkodi," he said, "remember this. Trains may leave, but not all passengers return. Some journeys are not meant to be finished." With that, he rose slowly, gathering his shawl around him, and stepped off onto the dimly lit platform. I watched him disappear into the fog. And then, as the train began to move again, I realized something that made my skin prickle. There was no station name painted on the signboard, just a blank board, as though the place itself had been forgotten by time. The whistle blew, the train lurched forward, and the darkness reclaimed the night. That was the first time I heard the story of the last train to Dhanushkodi, and it was only the beginning. Chapter 1: Shores of the Forgotten Town. Sunlit sands, silent ruins, and a town swallowed by the sea. Welcome to the edges of a place forgotten by time. When I arrived in Rameshwaram the next morning, the town was already stirring. Pilgrims thronged the streets, carrying brass pots of holy water, walking barefoot towards the grand corridors of the Ramnath Swami temple. The smell of incense, the ringing of temple bells, and the calls of street vendors created a symphony of devotion and commerce. But beneath all the bustle, I felt an undertow of silence. Every conversation, every gesture seemed to hide a memory, as though the town lived under the shadow of something unspeakable. I checked into a small lodge near the seashore. The owner, a kindly man with a white beard, handed me the keys. When I told him I had come to see Dhanushkodi, his eyes darkened. "People still go there," he said, lowering his voice. "Tourists, photographers, wanderers like you. But remember, Dhanushkodi is not just ruins. It is memory itself. And memory has a way of pulling you in." That afternoon, I hired a jeep. The driver, a wiry fellow named Murugan, agreed to take me along the narrow sandbar road towards the abandoned town. The journey began on a proper tar road, but soon the landscape began to change. On either side stretched endless blue, the Bay of Bengal on the left, the Indian Ocean on the right. The road itself seemed no more than a ribbon of sand balancing between two immensities. The farther we went, the quieter it grew. The cries of the gulls replaced the honking of horns. The whisper of waves replaced the chatter of men. And then, on the horizon, I saw them. Ruins. Crumbling walls rose out of the sand like broken teeth. Roofless homes, their bricks worn smooth by decades of salt and wind. A church, skeletal and hollow, its pointed arches now framing nothing but sky. A railway station platform half buried, leading nowhere. "This is Dhanushkodi," Murugan said softly, as if speaking too loudly might disturb the dead. I stepped out of the jeep. The air was heavy, dense with silence. Even the waves seemed subdued, as though they too remembered. I walked through the ruins, my feet sinking into warm sand. Everywhere I turned, I saw fragments of a life interrupted. A wall with faded paint, a doorway leading into emptiness, a hand pump rusted and useless. Once, Dhanushkodi had been alive, a thriving town, a busy port where ships sailed to Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. A railway line connected it to the mainland, bringing pilgrims and traders to the very edge of India. Families lived here, children played in the lanes, fishermen returned with nets heavy with catch. But then came the night of December 22, 1964. The cyclone formed over the Bay of Bengal and grew monstrous as it moved toward the coast. Winds screamed at 270 kilometers per hour. Waves rose higher than houses. When it struck Dhanushkodi, it struck with fury. A tidal wave, more than 20 feet tall, swept across the town. Homes shattered, the church roof was ripped away, the post office crumbled, and the railway line, pride of Dhanushkodi, was torn from the earth. Train number 653, carrying more than 100 passengers, was lifted from the tracks and hurled into the sea. Not a soul survived. In less than an hour, Dhanushkodi ceased to exist. The government declared it unfit for living. Survivors left, and the town was abandoned. No rebuilding, no resurrection, just silence. Now, only fishermen's huts dot the edges, temporary shelters against the relentless sea. The rest lies in ruins, a ghost town left to the mercy of salt, sand, and memory. As I stood before the roofless church, I imagined the voices that once filled it, prayers, songs, laughter. Now, only the wind sang through its hollow arches. Murugan pointed towards a half-buried structure. That was the railway station, he said. From there, the train would go to the very end of the land. People said it felt like riding into the sea. I walked to the broken platform. The tracks were long gone, swallowed by sand and water. But if I closed my eyes, I could almost hear it. The whistle of an engine, the chatter of passengers, the clinking of ticket punchers. Then, just as quickly, the sound faded, leaving only the hiss of waves. A chill ran through me. I thought of the old man on the train, of his warning. Some journeys are not meant to be finished. And for the first time, I wondered, was I chasing a story, or was the story chasing me? As the sun dipped lower, painting the ruins in crimson, I knew this much. Dhanushkodi was not dead. It lived on, in stone, in sand, in whispers carried by the wind. And somewhere, hidden in that silence, was the secret of the last train.
Sweet, audible.
Chapter 2. The Stranger's Journal. An old leather-bound notebook, pages yellowed by years, concealing the final testimony of those who vanished aboard the last train. The next morning, I wandered through the narrow lanes of Rameshwaram's old bazaar. It was a place of color and noise, shops stacked with seashell trinkets, garlands of jasmine, brass lamps and conch shells polished smooth by the ocean. But amidst the bright stalls, one dim little shop drew me in. It was a second-hand bookstall, if you could call it that. A wooden crate spilling over with yellowed pages, brittle magazines and dog-eared novels. The shopkeeper, a frail man with spectacles too large for his face, barely looked up as I sifted through the pile. And then, I found it. It was a leather-bound notebook, weathered, its edges swollen with age and salt. The cover bore no title, only faint initials scratched into the surface. R.G. I opened it carefully. The handwriting inside was neat, deliberate, written in English with occasional Tamil words scrawled in the margins. On the very first page was a line that made my heart quicken. Duty compels me to record this. I was the guard on the last train to Dhanushkodi. I froze. Could it be a first-hand account from that fateful night? I glanced at the shopkeeper. How much for this? He shrugged. 50 rupees. Old paper, no value. I paid without another word. To me, it was worth far more than gold. Back in my lodge, I sat by the window as the evening light faded and began to read. The entries began innocuously enough. Notes about the train schedules, ticket checks, and minor complaints about late arrivals. The writer, whose name I soon discovered was Raja Gopal, had served as a guard on the Rameshwaram Dhanushkodi passenger train. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted. Lately, he wrote, I have seen strange things on the line. Lights flickering where there are no lamps. Figures walking near the tracks at night, dissolving into mist when I approach. Passengers complain of whispers in the compartment when all others are asleep. I leaned closer, my pulse quickening. Was this paranoia, or had he truly witnessed something? One entry, dated just days before the cyclone, chilled me. On the 18th, a lady in a white sari boarded the train at Rameshwaram. I asked for her ticket, but she did not speak. Her face was pale, eyes distant. When I turned to punch the ticket, she was gone, vanished into thin air. Several passengers swore they had seen her too. I paused, remembering the old man on the train who had spoken of the same woman. Could this be coincidence, or was there truly a phantom passenger bound for Dhanushkodi? I read on. The final entry, dated December 22, 1964, was written in hurried, uneven strokes. The storm is rising. Winds howl like demons. Passengers grow restless. Lanterns flicker, though I shield them. The engine driver insists we must go on. I feel dread clawing at me, yet duty binds me to stay. If anything happens, let this journal be my witness. The page ended abruptly. No more words followed. I sat back, the weight of the silence pressing upon me. I held in my hands not just paper and ink, but perhaps the last testimony of a man who vanished with the train. Outside, the wind had risen, rattling the shutters of my window. For a moment, I imagined it was December 1964 again. The night the sea came ashore, the night the train was swallowed whole. I closed the journal carefully. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. This was no longer just history. This was a mystery that refused to rest, tugging me toward the ruins of Dhanushkodi. And I knew then, with a certainty that was both thrilling and terrifying, that my journey had only just begun. Chapter 3: The Unfinished Journey. A new day, a deserted railway path, and a journey that seems impossible to complete. Shadows of the past follow every step. The next day dawned grey. The sky veiled with low clouds drifting in from the sea. I carried the journal with me, tucked carefully inside my bag, as if it were some fragile relic. Its weight seemed to grow heavier with every step, as though Rajagopal's unfinished words demanded resolution. I set out on foot, determined to follow the path of the railway line that once carried pilgrims, merchants, and lovers to the edge of India. Murugan, my driver, had offered to take me again by jeep, but I refused. There are journeys one must walk alone. The old tracks were long gone, swallowed by sand dunes and creeping seawater. But the path remained, etched faintly across the land like a scar that time could not heal. On either side stretched endless emptiness. To the east, the restless Bay of Bengal. To the west, the mighty Indian Ocean. Walking that narrow strip felt like treading a knife's edge between two worlds. The wind carried the scent of salt and the cries of unseen gulls. Occasionally, I passed fishermen repairing their nets, their weathered faces half curious, half cautious as they watched me. One of them, an elderly man with sun-blackened skin, called out, "You're heading to the ghost town?" I nodded. He set aside his net and limped closer. "Be careful, sir. Not everything that moves on that road belongs to the living." His words stopped me. "What do you mean?" He looked out towards the sea, his gaze distant. "Many nights, when the moon hides and the winds rise, we hear it. The whistle of a train. At first faint, then louder, until it seems the engine is upon us. But when we look, there is nothing, only the roar of the sea." I swallowed hard. "You've heard it yourself?" He nodded. Not just me, my father too, and his father before him. Some say it's the souls of those lost, still trying to reach the station that no longer exists. Others say the train runs to remind us of the night the sea grew hungry. His words lingered in the air, mingling with the hiss of waves. I thanked him and continued walking, but his warning followed me like a shadow. As I trudged further, the land grew thinner, the sand softer underfoot. Broken bricks lay scattered, remnants of homes long surrendered. A telegraph pole, tilted and rusted, jutted from the sand like the skeleton of a giant bird. I paused, often listening. The wind played tricks. Sometimes it was only the sea, but once or twice I could swear I heard something else. A distant rumble, rhythmic, metallic. Too faint to be certain, too persistent to ignore. At one point, I came across the remains of a platform, only a few stones half buried, but unmistakable. I stood there, trying to imagine it, bustling with passengers, the laughter of children, the cry of hawkers, the hiss of steam from the waiting engine. And then, like an echo across time, I thought I heard it, the sharp, piercing whistle of a train. I spun around. Nothing, only dunes and sea. My pulse quickened. Was it imagination or something more? I pulled the journal from my bag, thumbing to the page where Raja Gopal had written of ghostly lights and figures dissolving into mist. His words suddenly felt alive, as if the land itself was conspiring to prove them true. By late afternoon, the sky had grown darker, heavy with unshed rain. The road dwindled into shifting sands. I sat on a rock to rest, the ocean murmuring on both sides. That's when another fisherman approached, younger, with eyes sharp as polished glass. He carried a lantern, though it was still daylight. "You walk far, stranger," he said. "Yes, I want to see Dhanushkodi." He tilted his head. "Then you must also hear its truth. At night, when the tide is high, a train comes from the water. Its wheels do not touch the earth. It glides, glowing faint like moonlight. Some who see it follow, thinking it will take them home, but those who follow never return." A chill ran through me. "Have you seen it?" I asked. He smiled thinly. "No, and I never will. Some doors are not meant to be opened." With that, he walked away, leaving me with the weight of his words. As twilight spread across the sandbar, I rose and continued toward the horizon, where the ruins of Dhanushkodi waited. Each step felt heavier, as though unseen eyes watched from the shifting shadows. Behind me, the sea roared. Ahead, the wind carried whispers I could not understand. The unfinished journey of a train long lost was pulling me deeper, and I knew there would be no turning back. Chapter 4: Whispers of Ram Setu. The gentle murmur of the sea and the ancient legend of Ram Setu, a place where devotion and the supernatural coexist. By the time I reached the heart of Dhanushkodi's ruins, night had fallen. The sky was a sheet of ink, and the stars glittered like broken glass scattered across velvet. I lit a small lamp I had brought with me and sat among the remnants of a collapsed house. The sea murmured on both sides as if whispering secrets too old for men to hear. Yet, even here, in this silence of the dead, I was not alone. In the distance, the glow of a lantern flickered. Curious, I followed it through the sand until I came upon a group of pilgrims. Their leader, a thin priest with a shaven head and sacred ash smeared across his brow, was chanting verses from the Ramayana. The others listened with folded hands, their eyes reflecting the flame's glow. When the priest noticed me, he gestured for me to sit. I did. "Do you know why this place is called Dhanushkodi?" he asked, his voice steady and melodic. I shook my head. He smiled faintly. "Here, according to legend, Lord Ram stood with his bow, his Dhanush. With it, he pointed to the sea, commanding his Vanara army to build the bridge to Lanka. The Setu of stones, known today as Ram Setu or Adam's Bridge, begins here." His voice carried across the night, blending with the crash of waves. "They say the bridge was not just stone and coral, but faith itself. A path laid by devotion, binding two lands across the ocean. Even today, when the tide is low, fishermen swear they can see its outline beneath the waves. Some stones float as if touched by divinity." I listened, captivated. The ruins around us seemed to pulse with meaning. The priest's eyes grew distant. "But this place is not only holy, it is cursed by memory. The cyclone did not only destroy houses and railways, it tore apart the faith of many. Some believed the gods had abandoned them. Others whispered that the souls of those who perished were trapped between worlds, unable to cross the Setu to the other side." His words sent a chill down my spine. "Do you mean the souls of the passengers?" I asked softly. He nodded. "Yes. Imagine a train bound for this sacred shore, carrying pilgrims eager to glimpse the bridge of Ram, and then, in a moment, swallowed by the sea. Such longing does not die easily. Such devotion does not rest. It lingers." I thought of the journal, of Raja Gopal's trembling handwriting, of the woman in the white sari who vanished before the ticket collector's eyes. Was she a pilgrim, a ghost, or a fragment of memory that refused to fade? The priest lowered his voice. "Some nights, when the moonlight touches the water, those who are pure of heart can hear their songs. Devotional hymns rising from the ocean, carried on the wind. Others hear only the whistle of the phantom train. Two truths, one place. Dhanushkodi." The fire crackled. The pilgrims bowed their heads. And I, sitting there amidst ruin and myth, felt as though the line between history and legend had dissolved. Fact and faith, tragedy and divinity, all of it lived here, stitched into the sand, the sea, and the silence. The priest closed his eyes and began to chant once more. His voice rose and fell like the tide. "Yatra yatra Raghunath kirtanam, tatra tatra krita mastakanjalim." Every syllable seemed to ripple through the air, mingling with the whispers of waves. And in that moment, I understood something I had not before. Dhanushkodi was not just a ghost town. It was a threshold, a place where history ended and legend began, where the living and the dead, the remembered and the forgotten, walked side by side. As the chant faded into silence, I felt a sudden gust of wind sweep across the ruins. The lamp flickered violently. For a heartbeat, I thought I heard it again, the long, distant wail of a train whistle. The priest's eyes opened slowly. He looked at me with an expression both knowing and sad. "You hear them too," he said. "The journey is not yet over." Chapter 5. The Last Ticket Collector. The lone man who witnessed the final train's destruction, his words, his memories, and the lady in white who never returned. As dawn broke the following day, I decided to venture deeper into Rameshwaram, searching for anyone who might have witnessed the last train. The ruins of Dhanushkodi were still too distant to approach safely, and I needed more clues, more voices to fill in the silence left by the journal. It was in a quiet alley tucked between a row of small temples that I found him. An old man, thin as a reed, sat on a wooden stool counting coins from a tin box. His eyes, clouded with age, brightened momentarily as I approached. "I hear you were a ticket collector," I began cautiously. He looked up slowly, studied me, and then nodded. "I was the last one. December 22, 1964, train number 653. I felt a shiver. This was the link I had been searching for. "You survived?" He let out a humorous laugh. "Survival is a matter of luck and some mistakes." He motioned for me to sit. His hands trembled as he poured a thin stream of tea into 2 chipped cups. We sat in silence for a moment, the aroma of boiled spices mingling with the salty wind drifting from the sea. "Tell me about that night," I urged gently. He sighed and closed his eyes, as though summoning memories he had long tried to forget. The train left Rameshwaram station at dusk. Passengers, pilgrims, families, merchants, everyone eager for the shore. I remember issuing tickets with trembling hands, noticing the faces of those who would never return. There was one woman, a lady in a white sari. She boarded quietly, gave no words, only a look that chilled me. I remember thinking she was strange, but I didn't realize strange can sometimes be a warning. He shook his head slowly. By the time we reached the midpoint of the track, the storm had already begun to roar. Wind tore at the train, waves leapt like giants. People prayed aloud, held hands, cried. I did my duty, checked tickets, tried to calm them, but even I felt the fear crawling under my skin like ice. I swallowed hard. And the train? He hesitated, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. The last I remember, the engine screamed against the wind, the wheels lifting off the rails, the air thick with water and salt. And then, nothing. Darkness, silence. The sea took everything. His eyes met mine, wet with the weight of memory. I was the only one to survive, washed ashore before dawn. When I woke, the town was gone. The station, the tracks, the lives, all gone. Not a thing remained. I shivered. The story was horrifying enough, but what unsettled me most was the sense of guilt that clung to him like a shadow. "And the lady in white?" I asked softly. He paused, as if afraid to speak her name. "Some say she is a ghost, waiting on the shore for the train that never arrives. Others believe she was a warning. I do not know. But I saw her once on the platform, just before the train vanished. Her eyes were empty, yet they stared at me, and I knew that she was not of this world." The old man's voice trembled. For a moment, we were suspended between time, the past alive in the present, as vivid as any living memory. "Why tell me this now?" I asked. "Because," he whispered, "people like you will go looking. You will walk where we cannot. And perhaps if you are brave or foolish, you might hear the train whistle again. You might see her." The words settled over me like a heavy fog. I realized then that the story of Dhanushkodi was not just one of loss, but of persistence, a haunting that refused to end. As I stood to leave, he placed a frail hand on my shoulder. "Remember," he said, voice low, almost a breath against the wind, The train still runs. For some, it never stops. And some passengers are still waiting for their journey to end. I nodded, speechless, carrying not only his story but the echo of those lost lives. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the alley. But the shadows were not entirely mine. Somewhere beneath the waves and sand, the last train to Dhanushkodi waited. And I was already on its trail. Chapter 6: Cyclone Night. The wind, the waves, and the fear that gripped a town. The night when the sea rose in fury and erased all in its path. December 22nd, 1964 began like any other day in Dhanushkodi. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the ocean with gold and crimson, and the town's streets hummed with the usual rhythm. Children running barefoot, merchants shouting over the clatter of carts, and the faint whistle of the train waiting at the platform. But the air felt different that morning. Even the birds seemed uneasy, flapping restlessly over the empty fields. Fishermen noticed the waves growing taller than usual, wind gusts that tore at nets and roofs. Some whispered of an ill omen, others laughed it off, too busy with life's small urgencies to pay heed. The train, number 653, was ready. Families with children, pilgrims eager to glimpse the Setu, and merchants transporting goods to the tip of the peninsula lined the platform. Raja Gopal, the ticket collector, checked tickets methodically, though his hands shook as he handed them back. The woman in the white sari had appeared again, silent, distant, staring at the horizon as if expecting something long overdue. No one dared speak to her, though several passengers exchanged uneasy glances. As the train departed, a low rumble began in the distance. At first subtle, almost unnoticed, it grew rapidly, a deep growl that made the ground tremble beneath their feet. By mid-morning, the storm had arrived. Wind screamed at unimaginable speeds, tearing at the trees, uprooting palms, and bending metal roofs like paper. Waves, monstrous and frenzied, leapt from the sea and crashed upon the shore, swallowing streets and huts in an instant. Inside the train, panic spread like wildfire. Children cried, mothers clutched them tightly. Men prayed aloud, and the engine driver struggled to keep control. Raja Gopal moved down the aisle, offering words of comfort, though none reached the terror-stricken passengers. The journal's pages describe how even the strongest hearts faltered that day. One passage reads, "The sky has become a monster. Waves taller than houses strike the train. Water sprays like daggers. The wind is a living thing, howling, screaming, seeking to devour us. I hold tickets in my hand, and yet they are meaningless. We are passengers bound for oblivion." Outside the windows, lightning danced across the horizon, illuminating the approaching tidal wave, a wall of water taller than anything the town had seen. Rail tracks began to buckle and disappear beneath the frothing sea. The engine roared in defiance, but the waves were relentless. The train, a proud symbol of progress and connection, lifted off the tracks, swaying violently as though caught in the talons of some monstrous bird. Passengers clung to one another, praying, screaming, whispering apologies for sins they had yet to commit. In the chaos, Raja Gopal caught a glimpse of the lady in white again. She stood at the edge of a carriage window, her gaze fixed on him, silent, unwavering. He tried to reach her, but the train lurched violently. In the next moment, the engine and all its coaches were swallowed by the sea, disappearing into the dark, foaming abyss. The town itself vanished as the wave roared inland. Houses, the church, the post office, and the station were swept away. The sand swallowed everything, leaving no trace of human life. Over 1,800 souls perished that night, their bodies and memories mingled with the salt water. In the journal, Raja Gopal's last words were scrawled hastily, almost illegible. "I see the sea. It has taken them all. And yet, something moves in the water, something that does not die. The train still runs." Even today, decades later, those words echo across the ruins of Dhanushkodi. Survivors remember the night as if it were yesterday. The screams, the roar of the waves, and the unearthly silence that followed. As I read by the flickering lamp in my lodge, the wind outside seemed to mimic that very howl, as though time itself had folded and the cyclone had returned, not in fury, but in memory. And somewhere I knew the phantom train awaited its next passenger, still bound to the shore, still carrying souls that had never reached the end of their journey. Chapter 7: The Wave. The monstrous wave that swallowed everything, and the echo of the train that continues to haunt the shore. The storm's fury escalated with terrifying speed. By late afternoon, the wind had become a living predator, hurling sand, palm fronds, and debris in every direction. Waves roared like mountains, rising higher than the tallest rooftops of Dhanushkodi. The train, once a proud symbol of progress, creaked and groaned under the assault, its iron frame straining against the wind and the rising tide. Inside, chaos reigned. Passengers clung to each other in desperate prayer. Mothers pressed their children to their chests. Merchants tried to secure their cargo, and the driver fought to keep the wheels on the tracks, though the rails themselves were slowly disappearing beneath the pounding sea. Raja Gopal, the ticket collector, moved down the aisle with trembling hands. He whispered words of comfort he barely believed himself, issuing tickets that now seemed meaningless in the face of an unstoppable force. He caught one last glimpse of the lady in white. She stood silently at a carriage window, eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his heart skip. Then, in a flash, she vanished as though swallowed by the storm itself. Outside, the sea rose like an avenging deity. A massive wave, over 20 feet high, crashed onto the shore and engulfed the train. The engine lifted from the tracks, tilting dangerously as water and wind combined in a monstrous, relentless assault. Coaches twisted and snapped, the metallic screeching blending with the screams of terrified passengers. For those few moments, the world seemed suspended in chaos and horror. Time, wind, and water merged into one unstoppable force. When the wave receded, the train was gone. Tracks, station, houses, all vanished beneath the surging sea. The town of Dhanushkodi, vibrant and alive just hours before, had been erased in a single, merciless sweep. The next morning, only debris floated in the water. Splintered wood, twisted metal, and fragments of personal belongings. Survivors washed ashore, shaken, broken, and speechless. The official death toll surpassed 1,800 souls. Yet, as the years passed, locals whispered of something else, something that the sea had failed to claim. They said that on certain nights, when the moonlight danced on the waves and the wind carried a strange hum, the train could be heard. Its whistle, metallic and distant, yet unmistakable, cut across the darkness. And sometimes travelers claimed shadowy figures could be glimpsed inside the phantom coaches, staring with empty eyes, forever bound to the journey that had ended too soon. Even today, the ruins of Dhanushkodi remain partially submerged under sand, salt, and memory. Yet, for those who dare to visit, the story lives, etched into the wind, whispered by the waves, and carried in the imagination of anyone who remembers or listens carefully. The sea had taken the town, the train, and countless lives. But the legend, the echo of that doomed journey, remained, haunting the land, refusing to fade. And for the curious, for the brave, and for the foolhardy, the last train to Dhanushkodi still waits, somewhere beyond the veil of time, ready to depart again. Chapter 8. Return of the Phantom Train. The ghostly train returns, now composed of shadows and mist. Will you follow it into the unknown? The ruins of Dhanushkodi was silent when I arrived that night. The only light coming from a crescent moon hanging low over the horizon. The wind carried salt and the faint murmur of waves. Every step I took on the soft sand seemed to echo across decades, and I could feel the weight of history pressing down like an invisible hand. I had camped near the skeletal remains of the railway platform, the journal of Raja Gopal tucked safely inside my bag. Hours passed in uneasy silence. Then, just after midnight, I heard it, a faint metallic clatter in the distance. At first, I thought it was the wind tossing debris, but the rhythm was too precise, too deliberate to be mere coincidence. I froze. A whistle pierced the night, high-pitched, eerie, impossibly close, yet distant at once. My heart raced. I remembered the old man's warning on the train, the tales from the fishermen, the priest's whispered chant, and Raja Gopal's last words. And now I was hearing it for myself. I turned towards the sound. Through the darkness, I saw it. A train, shimmering faintly, as if composed of moonlight and mist. The engine glided across the sand, wheels lifting just above the ground, unbound by rails. Coaches followed, spectral, filled with shadowy figures staring blankly, faces pale and hollow. I felt a pull, a magnetic tug towards the phantom. Some deep primal part of me wanted to run, and yet another part wanted to follow. I remembered the words of the last ticket collector. Some passengers are still waiting for their journey to end. The closer the train came, the colder the air became, and the whispers of the waves were replaced by faint murmurs from the coaches. Prayers, songs, laughter, all frozen in time. And there, in the second coach, I saw her, the lady in white. Her gaze met mine, silent, unwavering, and strangely calm. I stepped forward, compelled, my feet sinking into the sand. A part of me wanted to speak, to ask her who she was, why she waited, why the train had returned. But before I could move closer, the engine passed right through where I stood, leaving me breathless and trembling. The shadowy passengers seemed to stare straight through me, their eyes hollow, their mouths silent. When the train vanished into the darkness beyond the ruins, the wind returned, carrying with it only the sound of the sea. I sank to the ground, gasping, clutching Raja Gopal's journal to my chest. For a long while, I sat there, trying to make sense of what I had seen. The stories were no longer stories, they were real. The train had returned, a spectral echo of the night when the sea swallowed Dhanushkodi. And the passengers, perhaps they were still bound to that journey, eternally riding the tracks that no longer existed. As I looked out over the ruins, the skeletal church silhouetted against the moonlight, I realized something that both terrified and awed me. Dhanushkodi was not gone. It existed in layers: history, legend, memory, and now something else entirely. A bridge between the living and the dead, between past and present, between what had been and what could never be. The phantom train had returned for the night, and I, for better or worse, had witnessed it.
Sweet, audible.
Chapter 9. The Choice. A deserted platform, ghostly passengers, and a decision. You must choose whether to board the phantom train or return to the living world. The night air was heavy, thick with salt and mystery as I stood among the ruins of Dhanushkodi. The phantom train had passed once more, and its echoes lingered in the air like a living pulse. I could still see the faint shimmer of moonlight tracing the outlines of the ghostly coaches, and in the distance, the lady in white watched silently. I felt an irresistible pull, a strange tug in my chest. Part of me wanted to chase the train, to step aboard and follow the shadows into the unknown. Another part of me screamed to run, to leave this haunted place and never return. I opened Raja Gopal's journal, seeking guidance, though I knew no words could truly prepare me for what lay ahead. The pages trembled in my hands as if alive, urging me to decide. The whispers returned, soft at first, then louder, almost forming words. Come, complete the journey, do not fear. My heart pounded. Every rational thought in me warned that this was madness. The stories, the legends, the warnings, they all existed to protect the living from following where the dead had been trapped. Yet, the desire to witness, to understand, to cross the threshold between history and eternity was overwhelming. I glanced at the skeletal platform, the sand, the skeletal remains of the church, and finally towards the endless line of horizon where the ocean met the sky. The wind carried a cold, almost human presence. It was as if the sea itself was holding its breath, waiting. Then I saw movement along the edge of the ruins, shadowy figures stepping off the phantom coaches, their forms half transparent, their eyes hollow but pleading. Some extended hands, as though inviting me to join them. The lady in white stood at the very front, motionless, her gaze piercing through the darkness. I had a choice: step towards the phantom train and its passengers, risking becoming part of their eternal journey, or retreat to the living world, carrying only the knowledge, the memory, and the story. For a long moment, I stood frozen, listening to the waves, the wind, the faint hum of the train, still lingering like a heartbeat in the ruins. I remembered the old man on the train, the fisherman, the priest, and the last ticket collector. Their warnings, their stories, their grief, they were all here, in this place, waiting for someone to heed them. Slowly, deliberately, I stepped back from the platform. The pull of the phantom train remained, haunting, insistent, but I realized that some journeys are not meant to be completed. Some passengers are destined to ride forever, and some stories are meant to be witnessed, not joined. I turned away from the sand, the ruins, and the ghostly line of the railway. With every step toward Rameshwaram, toward safety, the whispers softened, the chill in the air lessened. Behind me, the phantom train seemed to dissolve into the mist, leaving only the faintest echo of its whistle. I walked through the ruins one last time, carrying Raja Gopal's journal and the weight of those lost souls. Dhanushkodi remained, a threshold between the living and the dead, a bridge between memory and legend. And though I had made the choice to leave, I knew the train would continue its journey, waiting for the next curious traveler, brave enough or foolish enough to hear its call. Chapter 10 Epilogue The Last Departure. The first light of dawn, a silent town, and the faint whisper of a train, a journey that never truly ends, waiting for its next witness. The first light of dawn painted the ruins of Dhanushkodi in pale gold and silver, softening the harsh outlines of broken walls, roofless homes, and the skeletal church. The sand glimmered with moisture from the receding tide, and the whispers of the sea seemed gentler now, like a lullaby rather than a warning. I stood on the edge of the shore, the journal of Raja Gopal in my hand. Its pages had guided me through stories of courage, fear, tragedy, and legend. I traced the words with my fingers, imagining the life of the man who had borne witness to the last train and all the souls it carried. Dhanushkodi was quiet, almost serene, but beneath that calm lay the weight of history, the lives lost, the dreams unfinished, the ghosts still roaming the sand. And yet, it was more than just ruins. It was a memory, a testament, a bridge between past and present. I thought of the lady in white, of the passengers who never reached their destination, and of the phantom train that returned across the sand and mist. They were still here, existing somewhere between legend and reality, waiting for those who dared to witness them. As I turned to leave, a soft breeze carried a faint sound, barely perceptible, yet unmistakable, the distant whistle of a train. It was gentle this time, a whisper rather than a roar, almost like a farewell. My heart skipped, but I did not look back. The journey had changed me. Dhanushkodi was no longer just a story I had heard or a history I had read. It had become a living memory, etched into my mind, my soul, and perhaps into the very air I breathed. Somewhere far off, beyond the horizon, the phantom train would continue its endless journey, carrying its passengers along a track that no longer existed, bound by time, water, and devotion. And for those who listened carefully, who dared to walk the sand and hear the whispers, its presence could still be felt, a reminder that some journeys never truly end. As I left the ghost town behind, I felt a strange peace. I had walked among the ruins, listened to the stories, and glimpsed the unseen. And now I carried them with me, the memories of the last train to Dhanushkodi, the echoes of its whistle, and the knowledge that history, legend, and the supernatural could coexist in a place where the living dared to witness. The train had departed once more, but its story remained, waiting for the next listener, the next traveler, the next witness. And in that eternal waiting, Dhanushkodi continued to live, not as a town erased by the sea, but as a memory unbroken, a story untold, a journey unfinished. The sea lapped gently at my feet, the wind whispered through the ruins, and somewhere far away, I could almost hear the faint, lingering whistle of the last train, forever bound to the shores of Dhanushkodi. Thank you for listening Last Train to Dhanushkodi, an audiobook based on a real incident, written, narrated and published by Sweet Audible.